I still remember the sound of that deadbolt sliding shut. It was small, sharp, final. Almost polite, the way someone closes a cabinet. Except it wasn't a cabinet. It was the front door of the house we helped buy. The house where my husband's medications were inside, where my granddaughter's drawings still hung on the fridge, and where we had believed, truly believed, we would spend the rest of our lives close to family. It was drizzling that evening, the kind of cold, thin rain that slips through your clothes before you even realize you're wet. I was holding a bag of groceries in one hand, the milk, bread, Howard's low-sodium soup, and in the other hand, I carried his prescription refill. We had only stepped out for 30 minutes. We thought we'd be back in time for dinner with the kids. I didn't think anything was wrong until the key refused to turn. At first, I thought my grip was weak. My hands shake sometimes. So I tried again. And again. I wiped the key, blew into the lock the way Howard taught me, tried the spare key he keeps on his ring. Nothing. Then the porch light flicked on, blinding me for a second. And behind the glass panel of the door, there she was. Amanda. My daughter-in-law. Arms crossed. Face calm, but cold in a way I had never seen before. She kept her last name, Bowen. I didn't think twice about it at the time. She didn't open the door. She didn't even reach for the handle. She just looked at us, two tired, damp grandparents standing at the home we'd poured our savings into, and said, almost gently, "You can't stay here anymore. Find somewhere else." Just like that. I remember whispering, "Amanda? Sweetheart? The keys aren't working," as if this were some kind of mistake. As if she would laugh and wave us in. But she didn't laugh. And then I saw him. Brian. My son. Standing behind her with his eyes down, shoulders tense, hands in his pockets like a scolded child. "Mom," he said, without looking at me, "it's better this way." Better for who? Better for what? He didn't say. Before I could speak, Amanda reached up and flipped the porch light switch. The brightness vanished, leaving us in shadow, staring at our own reflections in the dark glass. That's the moment my heart broke in a quiet, almost dignified way, because the truth wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It simply settled in my chest. We weren't family to her anymore. We were a problem to remove. And she believed she had finally removed us. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that the one thing she underestimated was the paperwork. Before we go on, tell me where you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories coming soon. I used to believe that helping your children get started in life was one of the quiet joys of growing older. You work, you save, you plan, and one day, you get to ease their burden a little. That's what I thought when Brian came to us, excitement all over his face, talking about the house he and Amanda had found. It was small, but cozy, with a wide porch and enough room for the kids to run around. He showed us pictures on his phone, flipping through them like a child who couldn't contain himself. But the truth sat underneath all that excitement: they couldn't afford the down payment. Howard and I looked at each other that night at the kitchen table. We had worked our whole lives, lived simply, and saved what we could. We weren't rich, just careful. And we had always said that whenever Brian needed real help, we'd step in. So we made a promise. We told him we would cover the down payment, but only if it meant we'd all live together, support one another, and grow old surrounded by family instead of loneliness. He hugged us tight, with gratitude I still remember, and said, "Mom, this will be your home too. You'll never worry about rent again." When Amanda heard the news, she arrived the next day with flowers. Lilies, bright and fragrant. She hugged me and said we were a blessing and promised we'd always have a place with them. She talked about shared dinners, shared holidays, shared responsibilities. It felt right. It felt good. Like we were all stepping into the next chapter of our lives with hope. I just didn't know then how quickly hope can be rewritten by someone else's plans. The day we moved into the house felt almost like a celebration. The sun was warm, the kids were running in and out of the empty rooms, and there was this feeling, this illusion, that we were all building something together. Howard carried the lighter boxes while Brian and I handled the rest. Amanda hovered nearby, directing where things should go, but she was smiling, bright and cheerful, talking about paint colors and how she wanted to plant herbs by the kitchen window. When she showed us the small bedroom at the back of the house, she said, "This will be perfect for you too. Close enough to the kids, but still your own space." She even placed a tiny potted plant on the windowsill, saying it was a welcome gift. It felt thoughtful at the time. Now, I'm not so sure. Howard handed Brian a little ring of keys, the ones he'd made copies of at the hardware store. Brian laughed and shook the ring like it was a prize. Then he pressed a pair into my hand and said, "It's our home now, Mom. All of us." But I didn't miss the quick glance Amanda gave him when he said that. A flicker. Small, but there. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I heard them whispering in their room. At first it was soft, then sharper. I heard my name once, just my name, and then silence. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, telling myself it was nothing. Just stress. Just adjustment. But a seed of worry settled quietly in my stomach. And sometimes, the smallest seeds grow into the heaviest truths. At first, it was small things. So small that I kept telling myself not to make a fuss. Everyone needs time to adjust, I'd say. Everyone has their quirks. But small things have a way of stacking themselves quietly, like pebbles in your shoe. You don't notice the discomfort until you finally stop walking. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Amanda made a joke in this light, breezy tone. She said retired people had so much time to meddle and maybe she'd put me in charge of the kitchen because I was always rearranging things anyway. She laughed, Brian laughed politely, and I smiled even though I felt the sting travel straight through me. I wasn't rearranging anything, just trying to make room for our groceries. A few days later, I noticed she'd moved my food containers to a cabinet so low I had to crouch to reach them. When I casually asked why, she said, "Oh, I just needed the upper shelves for our things." Her smile never left her face, but something behind it had changed. There were other little shifts. When I sat in the living room too long, she would accidentally vacuum around me. She corrected how I folded towels. She sighed loudly when I used the washing machine during peak hours, as she put it. Brian always tried to smooth things over. "Mom, she's just stressed. Work is rough. You know how HR can be." He'd say it with this tired smile, like he was asking me to help keep the peace. So I swallowed the discomfort, even though Howard saw it in my eyes. "Lorraine," he murmured one night, "something's off." I didn't want to believe him. But I felt it too. The day the family photos went up, I stood in the hallway watching Amanda arrange the frames. She moved with purpose, stepping back every few seconds to check the balance of each row. The photos were beautiful: Chloe's first day of school, Adam's birthday party, Brian and Amanda at the beach, holiday gatherings with her side of the family. All smiles. All warmth. I waited for her to leave a little space at the end. Just enough for one or two of ours, maybe our wedding picture, or the photo of Howard holding newborn Brian for the first time. I even had the frame ready. But the space never opened. Instead, when the last nail went in, she dusted her hands lightly and said, "There." A cohesive wall. It really tells our story, doesn't it? I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. "It's lovely," I said. "Should we add a few of ours? Just one or two?" Amanda smiled tightly, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Oh, maybe later. I'm trying to keep the aesthetic consistent for now." Consistent. Cohesive. Her favorite words. Later that week, one of Amanda's friends came by. When she asked who we were, Amanda introduced us as Brian's parents who are staying with us for a bit. Staying with us for a bit. As if we were passing through. As if we weren't part of this house, part of this family. I didn't correct her. I felt too embarrassed. That night, after everyone went to bed, I opened my leather folder and pulled out the handwritten agreement we'd all signed. The one that said we'd live with them permanently. The one that felt, suddenly, like a fading memory. I stared at it for a long time. Because for the first time, I felt myself disappearing from the walls, and from the story. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Howard was sitting in the living room, watching one of those old Western movies he loves. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard a strange thump, soft, but wrong. When I rushed in, I found him gripping the arm of the couch, pale and sweating, his breath shallow. "Lorraine, dizzy," he whispered. My heart lodged in my throat. I steadied him, grabbed his medication, and called out for Brian. Instead, Amanda appeared first, her phone already in hand. To her credit, she moved quickly, asked him questions, checked his pulse, called the clinic. But once the danger passed and Howard's color returned, something in her face hardened. Later that evening, she pulled me aside in the hallway. "We really need to be careful," she said, her tone icy sweet. "Health issues can create a lot of responsibility. Liability, even." I blinked at her. "Liability? This is family." She sighed like I was being naive. "Still, it's important we have the right paperwork. Just in case something happens." The next morning, she brought a thick stack of forms to our bedroom, pages clipped together neatly, highlighted sections, sticky notes marking where to sign. Emergency authorizations, she called them. Just standard procedure. I felt overwhelmed, still shaken from seeing Howard collapse. She kept reassuring me with that calm, practiced voice. "It's for his safety. You trust me, don't you?" So I signed. And Howard signed. We didn't read every page. My hands were trembling too much. Later that night, as we lay in bed, Howard whispered, "Lorraine, what did we sign today?" I didn't know. And the guilt settled heavy in my chest. Because something about Amanda's urgency didn't feel like concern. It felt like preparation. After Howard's health scare, something in the house changed. Not suddenly, not loudly, more like a slow tightening of invisible threads. Amanda began speaking differently, not just to us, but about us. Her tone stayed polite, but the warmth she once showed had cooled into something rigid. Controlled. She started setting what she called house guidelines. At first, it sounded harmless enough. "Let's keep a quiet time after 9, she said one evening. "The kids need routine." But soon the list grew longer. No cooking after 6 unless we asked first. No visitors without at least 24 hours notice. No laundry on weekdays. No adjusting the thermostat. Every rule came with a smile so tight it could cut glass. I tried to follow them. Truly, I did. I didn't want tension. I didn't want Brian caught in the middle. But rules have a way of changing the atmosphere of a home. Little by little, it stopped feeling like a shared space and started feeling more like we were tenants, silent ones, tiptoeing around someone else's domain. One afternoon, as I folded laundry in the living room, Amanda walked in and paused, eyebrows lifting. "Oh, you're still here," she said, as if the room belonged to her alone. Then she added, "This is really the kids' play area. Maybe your room would be more comfortable." More comfortable. Another phrase she used often when she wanted us out of sight. When I told Brian later, he rubbed the back of his neck and sighed. "Mom, please. She's just trying to organize the house. She means well." But he didn't meet my eyes when he said it. That night, as I lay in bed, Howard turned to me quietly. "Lorraine," he said, "whose house does she think this is?" I didn't answer. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner. Amanda's relatives were visiting from out of town, and she wanted to host. I tried to make myself useful, set the table, prepare a salad, keep the kids entertained while everyone settled in. I thought if I stayed in the background, things might feel normal. But humiliation has a way of finding you even when you're trying to stay small. We all sat around the table passing dishes, making polite conversation. Amanda's aunt complimented the house, saying how beautiful it was, how put together everything looked. Amanda smiled proudly and said, "Oh, it's been a lot of work. Especially taking care of extra people." I froze for just a second. Maybe I misheard. Then she laughed and added, honestly, we rescued Brian's parents. They couldn't manage money very well, so we let them stay with us. It's been an adjustment. The room went quiet for a moment, just long enough for my cheeks to burn. Her relatives looked at us with soft sympathy, the kind you give people who've fallen on hard times. I felt Howard's hand slide over mine under the table, a silent anchor. I tried to correct the story gently. We actually helped with the down payment. It was a family decision, but Amanda cut me off smoothly. Oh, Lorraine, don't worry about all that. Let's just enjoy dinner. Brian kept his eyes on his plate. The rest of the meal felt like swallowing broken glass. I smiled when I had to. I made small talk. But something inside me shifted. It was the moment I realized Amanda wasn't just irritated by us. She was rewriting the narrative, and she was erasing us in the process. Later that night, as we walked back to our room, I whispered to Howard, she's changing the story, and people are starting to believe her. He squeezed my hand. But he didn't say I was wrong. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind you barely remember, until something changes everything. I was in the kitchen wiping down the counters after lunch when I noticed a stack of unopened mail near the fruit bowl. Amanda usually sorted it quickly, but that day she'd rushed out to pick up the kids, leaving the envelopes scattered. I wasn't trying to snoop. I was simply gathering them into a neat pile when one envelope slid open. A single sheet peeked out, bold letters across the top reading, Refinance Summary. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But the moment I saw Brian and Amanda's names printed clearly, and only their names, my breath caught. A line near the bottom made my hands go cold. Borrowers/owners, Brian Fisher and Amanda Bowen. We'd trusted them so completely, we never demanded to see the final deed papers with our own eyes. No mention of us. No nod to the money we contributed. No space left for the promise we all made together. For a moment I stood frozen, the hum of the refrigerator loud in the silence. My first thought was confusion. Then doubt. Then, slowly, dread. I reached for my leather folder, flipping through the handwritten agreement we'd signed before buying the house. The one that said we would live there permanently. The one Brian had written himself. I compared signatures, dates, numbers. Everything matched what we had done. But now, none of it seemed to match reality. Had something changed? Had we misunderstood? Or had decisions been made behind closed doors? As I placed the refinance letter back exactly where I found it, my hands trembled. A cold understanding started to form, quiet and unwelcome. Something in this house was being rearranged. Not just the kitchen. Not just the rules. But the truth itself. And the worst part? I didn't realize yet. I'd already signed the papers that would help her do it. The next morning, I waited until Amanda left for work before approaching Brian. He was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and scrolling on his phone, looking tired in a way I hadn't seen before. I sat down across from him, my leather folder resting on my lap like a shield. Brian, I began gently, I found a refinance notice yesterday. Your names were on it, but not ours. His shoulders stiffened. He didn't look up. Mom, it's just paperwork. I tried to stay calm. Paperwork for what? Why weren't we told? He sighed, long and heavy, the kind of sigh people give when they know they're cornered. Amanda handled most of it. She said it was easier for the bank if it was just us. Mom, nothing has changed. But things had changed. I could hear it in his voice. A crack. A shift. Brian, I said softly, we paid the down payment. We moved in because we were meant to be part of this home. So why would our names disappear? He finally met my eyes, and for a moment I saw the boy I raised, the one who used to cling to my arm when he was scared. He looked guilty. Conflicted. Amanda said it wouldn't matter, he whispered. She said you and Dad would always live here. That the names on the deed were just technical. Technical. Another word used to erase reality. I swallowed the ache rising in my chest. Son, if nothing is wrong, then why does this feel wrong? He didn't answer. He just rubbed his temples and muttered, "Please, Mom, don't start something. Amanda's been stressed. Let me handle it." But as I walked away, one truth followed me like a shadow: he wasn't handling anything. He was surrendering. The next day, I waited until the house was quiet before calling the bank. I sat on the edge of our small bed, hands shaking as I dialed the number printed at the top of the refinance notice. I told myself it was just a question. Just clarity. Nothing more. But deep down, I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. The representative, a polite young man with a soft voice, pulled up the account. After verifying Brian and Amanda's names, he paused. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you're not listed on the mortgage or the deed. Just Brian Fisher and Amanda Bowen." I gripped the phone tighter. "We contributed the down payment," I whispered. "We were supposed to be part owners. We live here." There was another pause. A careful one. "I'm very sorry. But as far as the documents on file, this is their property." Their property. I felt something inside me collapse, quietly, like a shelf giving way under too much weight. I thanked him with a voice that didn't sound like mine and hung up before he could say anything else. For a long moment, I just sat there staring at the floor. The house felt different now. Not warmer. Not safer. It felt foreign, like a place we were only pretending to belong to. I went to the kitchen to get some water, and that's when I heard them. Amanda's voice, sharp and low: "We need our own life, Brian. They can't stay here forever." Brian's reply was weak, tired. "I know. I just don't want to hurt them." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Then stop letting them take over everything. We're doing what's best for us." I stood frozen in the hallway, the truth finally landing with full weight: we were not partners in this home. We were obstacles. And Amanda was already planning the next step to remove us. After hearing Amanda say we couldn't stay forever, sleep became impossible. I lay awake staring at the ceiling until the faint gray of dawn slipped through the curtains. Howard breathed softly beside me, unaware I'd been up all night wrestling with questions that twisted like knots in my chest. When the house finally settled into its morning quiet, I got up and pulled my leather folder from the closet shelf. I opened it on the bed, spreading each paper out in careful rows: receipts, bank statements, handwritten notes, the moving agreement we all signed in the dining room the night before closing. And then I pulled out something else: my old budgeting notebook. I'd kept that notebook for years. Habit, mostly. Old school. Every check written, every withdrawal, every transfer. But now, as I flipped through its pages, the notebook felt different. Not like a habit, like a lifeline. I started listing everything on fresh paper: the exact amount we transferred for the down payment, the dates we withdrew cash to help them furnish the house, the checks we wrote for appliances, every promise Amanda and Brian made in text messages. I matched each line with a copy of a receipt or screenshot. At first, my hands trembled with fear. What if this was useless? What if none of it mattered because legally we were invisible? But the more I wrote, the clearer something became: we didn't just help them. We built this home with them. Page by page, fear began turning into something steadier, something like resolve. I took the stack of documents, photographed each one carefully, and saved them onto a small USB drive Howard had forgotten he owned. It wasn't a full plan yet. Just a beginning. But sometimes, power starts with proof. 2 days after I built my evidence stack, I walked into the community center on Maple Avenue. I didn't tell Brian or Amanda. I didn't even tell Howard until I was already on the bus. There was a small sign outside that read "Free Legal Clinic, Housing and Family Consultations," and I stood there for a long minute before gathering the courage to go inside. The waiting area smelled faintly of old books and strong coffee. A handful of people sat with envelopes, folders, and heavy eyes. I felt like I belonged there, people carrying troubles no one else believed. When my name was called, I was led to a small room where a woman with calm eyes and a warm smile introduced herself as attorney Monica Foster. She gestured for me to sit and asked what brought me in. My throat tightened. But once I started speaking about the down payment, the agreement, the refinance letter, the changed tone in the house, the words poured out of me, shaky but honest. I opened my leather folder on her desk. She looked through each document slowly, carefully, asking questions in a voice that never rushed or judged. After a while, she closed the folder gently. Mrs. Fisher, she said, you may have more rights than you think. What you contributed wasn't a gift, it was substantial financial support tied to a promise of residence. I blinked at her, surprised she saw what I saw. But, she continued softly, you'll need more. Texts, recordings, anything showing that living there was part of the agreement. And you must stay discreet. If she senses you're preparing, she may escalate. Escalate. The word settled cold in my stomach. I nodded slowly, gripping the folder. For the first time in months, someone believed me. And that felt like the start of something. Monica's words echoed in my mind for the rest of the day, you'll need more. It felt like both a warning and a challenge. When I got home, the house was unusually quiet. Amanda had taken the kids out, and Brian was still at work. Howard was napping. It was the first time in a while that I had the space and the nerve to start looking through my phone with real intention. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my messages, and scrolled all the way back to the weeks before we moved in. The old texts were still there, untouched and unedited, like fragments of a past that had been kinder. There it was, Amanda texting, your help means everything. Of course you'll live with us. This is your home too. And another, no rent ever. That's the whole point, we're a team. I took screenshots of everything, careful to include dates and timestamps. I emailed the files to myself and then printed them later at the library, feeding one sheet at a time into the old machine as my heart raced. Next, I photographed the page on the family wall calendar, the one where Brian had written parents move in on the move-in date. Amanda had drawn a little smiley face next to it back then. A gesture that now felt like a joke I hadn't understood. Fear rose in me again. What if she walked in while I was doing this? What if she sensed something and twisted it against us? Just as I gathered the papers into my folder, my phone buzzed. A message from Amanda, where are you? I froze. My pulse thudded in my ears. I typed back, out running errands, and hit send with trembling hands. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was preparing for a battle she didn't even know I'd begun. When I returned home after printing the screenshots, the atmosphere inside the house felt different, heavier, tight around the edges. Amanda was in the kitchen unloading groceries, her movements sharp and precise. She didn't look at me when I walked in. She didn't have to. I could feel the coldness radiating from her like a warning. You were out a long time, she said finally, still facing the refrigerator. I had errands, I replied, keeping my voice calm. She closed the fridge door a bit too hard. Well, next time let us know. It's stressful not knowing where you two are. We're responsible for a lot already. Responsible. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Over the next few days, the pressure increased. Amanda commented on everything, how I folded clothes, how I washed dishes, how I spoke to the kids. Each criticism was wrapped in a thin layer of politeness, but the intention underneath cut clean. You can't just do things your way, she'd say. This isn't your house to manage. Whenever I pushed back gently, she would tilt her head with exaggerated concern. Are you feeling overwhelmed, Lorraine? Maybe this living arrangement isn't healthy for you. Or for us. She said it often enough that I began writing the sentences down in my notebook, just in case. One evening, she pulled me aside and lowered her voice. If you make things difficult, I may need to talk to someone about guardianship options. For Howard, I mean. With his health. It felt like a punch. A threat cloaked in pretend care. I stared at her, speechless. She smiled sweetly, almost pitying. Let's just try to keep the peace. But that night, as I lay awake, I realized something chilling. Amanda wasn't just pushing us out. She was building a story to justify it. Monica's warning stayed with me, If she senses you're preparing, she may escalate. And she was right. Amanda's tone had sharpened, her patience thinning by the day. I felt the walls closing in, each conversation turning into a maze of traps. I knew I needed to protect myself, not physically, but with truth I could hold in my hands. So I started using the voice recorder on my phone. I didn't announce it, didn't wave it around like a weapon. I simply tucked the phone into my apron pocket or set it on a counter while cooking. Not to catch secrets. Just to capture what was already happening in plain sight. One afternoon, the house was tense. The kids were in their rooms, Brian wasn't home yet, and Amanda found me organizing the pantry. Something small set her off, maybe the position of the cereal boxes, maybe the way I moved a container. Her voice sliced through the kitchen. "You two are freeloaders," she snapped. "I'm done pretending. Legally, this is my house, and I can put you out any time I like." I stood still. Not shaking. Not crying. Just listening. She stepped closer, her eyes cold. "You think keeping old receipts gives you power? It doesn't. You don't have any rights here." Inside my apron pocket, the recorder was running. I swallowed, my throat dry. "Amanda, why would you say that?" "Because someone has to say the truth," she hissed. "And if Brian won't do it, I will." Later, alone in our room, I played the recording back. Every word came through clearly, her threats, her claims, her contempt. As I listened, something shifted in me. Fear didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. Because now I had her lies in her own voice, and that was the first real win I'd had in months. The children had always been a bright spot in that house, small anchors of innocence in a sea that was slowly getting darker. But even they could sense the tension growing between the adults. Kids always know, even when we think we're hiding it. One afternoon, Chloe sat beside me while I sorted laundry. She's quiet for her age, thoughtful, observant. She hesitated before speaking, then whispered, "Grandma, why is Mom so mad at you all the time?" The question cut deeper than any insult Amanda had thrown at me. I tried to smile gently. "Sometimes grown-ups get stressed, sweetheart. It's not your fault, and it's not mine either." She nodded slowly, like she didn't quite believe me but wanted to. Then she leaned in a little closer. "I heard them arguing last night. Mom said you and Grandpa make everything harder." Before I could respond, Adam bolted into the room holding one of his toy cars. He looked up at me with wide, confused eyes and asked, "Grandma, are you and Grandpa in trouble?" Trouble. That was the word Amanda had planted in their minds. I hugged Adam and told him softly, "No, sweetheart. We're not in trouble. We just have grown-up things to figure out." Chloe watched me carefully. There was something else behind her eyes, something she was debating whether to say. Finally, she whispered, "I saw Mom hiding some papers in her office. She put them in a folder that said legal. She told me not to touch it." My heart thudded. A chill crawled across my skin. I kept my voice calm. "Did she say anything else?" Chloe shook her head. She just looked nervous. The children left the room soon after, but their words stayed behind, heavy and unsettling. Because now I knew, Amanda wasn't just angry. She was preparing something, carefully. And children had seen it first. A few days after Chloe mentioned the legal folder, an opportunity came, quiet, simple, and risky. Brian and Amanda took the kids to a birthday party across town, and Howard was resting. For the first time in weeks, the house felt still. My heart pounded, because I knew this was a small window, and I didn't know if I'd get another. I walked to Amanda's home office with slow, careful steps. The door was half open, as if inviting me and warning me at the same time. I hesitated at the threshold, not because I doubted my instincts, but because I knew crossing it meant I could no longer pretend things might fix themselves. Inside, the room was spotless, organized in that rigid way only Amanda could manage. On the left side of the desk was the filing cabinet, one drawer slightly ajar, just as Chloe described. My palms were damp. I pulled the drawer open. The folder labeled legal sat right on top. I opened it and saw a stack of documents clipped together. My breath caught when I recognized the first page, the emergency authorization forms we signed after Howard's dizzy spell. But attached behind them was something completely different. A household agreement we had never discussed. Language we had never seen. Words that made my blood run cold, tenants at will with no ownership claim. No financial interest in the property. Permission to stay may be revoked at any time. My signature was on the last page. Shaky. Rushed. From the day of Howard's health scare. My hands trembled as I photographed each page, praying the shutter sound wouldn't echo through the quiet house. Then I sent every image to Monica with the simple message, I found this. Because in that moment, I understood this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. As I placed the folder back exactly where it was, a terrible clarity settled over me. Amanda hadn't just prepared for our removal. She had engineered it. The lockout didn't come with shouting or chaos. It came quietly, almost politely, the way a storm sometimes begins with a single drop of rain. That evening, the kids were at a school event. Brian and Amanda were in the kitchen when I walked in to put away a few dishes. Amanda was already tense, her movements sharp, her voice clipped. She glanced at the open cabinet I had just organized and said, with that familiar bite, I thought we talked about boundaries. Before I could answer, she stepped close, lowering her voice. This isn't working, Lorraine. You need to start thinking about other arrangements. My stomach dropped. Amanda, what are you saying? She didn't answer. She just walked past me, calling out to Brian, it's time. Howard and I decided to step out for a quick grocery run, just a few items for the week ahead. The air felt thick as we left, but I didn't want to escalate anything in front of Brian. I told myself things might calm down by the time we returned. They didn't. When we got back, grocery bags in hand, the keys didn't turn. Not the main key. Not the spare. Not even the copy Howard kept hidden in his wallet. I knocked softly at first. Then harder. The porch light flicked on. And there she was. Amanda. Calm. Cold. Standing behind the glass like a gatekeeper. You can't stay here anymore, she said. Find somewhere else. Brian appeared behind her, eyes down, unable, or unwilling, to meet my gaze. Mom, it's better this way. Then the porch light clicked off. And the lock clicked again. Final. Absolute. We stood in the darkness holding milk, bread, and medicine. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, blue and red lights began flashing across the driveway. The police were coming. But not for help. For us. The patrol car rolled to a stop in front of the house, its lights painting the driveway in red and blue. Howard squeezed my hand, his breathing shallow. We both stood there, two seniors in the dark, our groceries slowly soaking under the misty night air, unable to believe this was happening. An officer stepped out, adjusting his jacket as he approached. His expression wasn't harsh, but it was firm, professional, already shaped by whatever he had been told before he even saw us. Evening, he said. We received a call about a domestic disturbance. My heart stuttered. A what? He glanced at the locked door behind us. The homeowner reported that two individuals refused to leave the property and became verbally aggressive. I almost laughed, it came out as a broken exhale. Officer, we live here. We helped buy this house. Our things are inside. Our medicine is inside. Before he could respond, the front door cracked open. Amanda stood in the doorway with a carefully crafted expression of concern, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. Officer, thank you for coming, she said. We've tried everything. They just won't leave. The children are terrified. Terrified? Her lies were growing bolder by the minute. Brian hovered behind her like a shadow, jaw tight, eyes avoiding mine. He didn't say a word. The officer turned back to us, sympathy flickering briefly, then settling into procedure. Ma'am, sir, this looks like a civil matter, he said carefully. But tonight, the homeowner is asking you to leave. If you refuse, it can turn into trespassing. I'm not here to decide who's right, I'm here to keep things from escalating. He cleared his throat. I'm asking you to leave the premises tonight. If you return and they call again, we may have to take further action. Howard's shoulders sagged. My throat burned. We stepped back, powerless. As I walked to our car, I caught sight of someone across the street, our neighbor, Mr. Derek Allen, standing frozen on his porch, watching everything unfold. And in his eyes, I saw something Amanda hadn't expected: witness, truth, and quiet disbelief. We didn't drive far that night. Just around the corner, where the street lamps flickered unevenly and the houses looked unfamiliar in the dark. Howard was exhausted, his breathing shallow, and I spread his jacket over him as he leaned back in the passenger seat. I tried to steady myself, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Being ordered away from your own home, it hits in ways you don't expect. It empties you. We stayed there for hours, the car engine off, the cold creeping in through the windows. I kept replaying the officer's words, Amanda's lies, Brian's silence. Each memory stung sharper than the last. It was close to midnight when someone tapped on the window. I jumped, heart racing, then saw who it was. Mr. Derek Allen, our neighbor. He stepped back so I could open the door. Mrs. Fisher, he said softly, I saw what happened. I felt embarrassment heat my face. We didn't want anyone to know. He shook his head. Everyone saw enough. But I saw all of it. He told us he'd been on his porch when Amanda locked the door, heard her shouting that she was finally getting them out, watched us knock while she kept the lights off. He also saw the police arrive, and saw how Amanda acted when she opened the door for them, suddenly calm and innocent. His voice was steady, but there was anger simmering beneath it. If you need a statement, I'll give one. I don't like lies, Mrs. Fisher. And what she did tonight, that wasn't right. My throat tightened. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone, anyone, to simply say they believed us. Thank you, Derek, I whispered. In that cold, cramped car, something shifted inside me. Fear didn't vanish. But a small flame lit up beside it, a flame called witness. A flame called proof. And for the first time since the locks changed, I felt less alone. The next morning, after a night of broken sleep in the car, Howard and I made our way straight to Monica's office. I had texted her late the night before, explaining only that Amanda had locked us out. She responded within minutes, come as soon as you can. Bring everything. Monica greeted us with quiet urgency, ushering us into her small office filled with law books and soft lamps. She noticed Howard's exhaustion immediately and offered him a seat with a cup of water before turning to me. Tell me everything, she said. I did. Every detail. Every threat. Every word the officer said. Every lie Amanda fed them. Then I placed the new evidence on her desk: Derek's written statement, the photos of the tenant at will document, the recordings of Amanda calling us freeloaders and threatening to put us out, and the timeline I had written in my ledger the night before. Monica examined each item with sharp, focused calm. This is serious, she said finally. Locking you out without notice is an illegal eviction. And misrepresenting forms to get your signatures? That can be fraud. My heart thudded. Fraud. Hearing a lawyer say the word made everything feel real. But listen carefully, she continued. We need to build this properly. First, we'll file a complaint for illegal eviction and request immediate relief. Second, we'll freeze any attempt to sell the house until your financial interest is recognized. She paused, her tone steady. And third, we'll challenge the validity of those documents she added to your emergency forms. That alone could turn this case. Howard looked up, eyes tired but determined. Do we have a chance? Monica nodded, slow but confident. You have more than a chance. You have evidence. And now, you have witnesses. Her words settled over me like a warm blanket. For the first time in months, I felt something close to hope. By the time we found a small motel room for the night, my phone was already buzzing with messages. At first, I thought they were from Brian, maybe an apology, maybe an explanation. But they weren't from him at all. They were from relatives. From neighbors. From friends we hadn't spoken to in months. Each one carried some version of the same confused question. Lorraine, is everything okay? Are you really causing trouble at Brian's house? Amanda said you refused to leave. What happened? My stomach dropped. Amanda had moved quickly. She posted vague, emotional messages on social media, words like toxic, unsafe environment, protecting my family. She called extended relatives and painted herself as a young mother overwhelmed by unpredictable behavior from her in-laws. In one post, she even wrote, "Sometimes family hurts you the most. Choosing peace for my children." She made herself look like the victim. And she made us look unstable. By morning, even some of our own relatives were hesitant, unsure of what to believe. Not because they were cruel, just because the story she crafted sounded neat, logical, and rehearsed. The truth, on the other hand, was messy. Howard sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at his phone. My cousin just asked if I yelled at the kids, he whispered, voice trembling. Lorraine, I never raised my voice in that house. I sat beside him, placing my hand on his. I know. And soon, everyone else will know too. But inside, I felt a different kind of fear. Not fear of losing the house. Not fear of being homeless. Fear of being erased. Not just from the home, but from the family narrative. Then my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Monica, "Call me ASAP. They're trying to sell the house." I called Monica the moment I saw her message. My hands were shaking so hard the phone nearly slipped. She picked up on the first ring. "Lorraine, listen carefully," she said. "I checked the listings. Your house is online. Fresh photos. A full description. They're trying to sell it fast." For a moment, the motel room felt like it tilted. Howard looked up at me, worry creasing his forehead as I repeated Monica's words. "Sell the house. Our house. The one we helped build and believed we'd grow old in." Monica continued, "The listing was posted this afternoon. They're moving aggressively. They want to liquidate before you can stake a claim." I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. "Can they really sell it without notifying us?" "They can try," she replied. "But once a dispute is filed, the buyer will be warned. We need to act immediately." She instructed me to email her every document again so she could attach them to an emergency injunction. I could hear her typing in the background, already drafting the paperwork. After the call, I pulled up the listing myself. Seeing the photos, the living room where we spent holidays, the kitchen where we cooked with the kids, the backyard where Adam learned to ride a bike, now staged and scrubbed of any trace of us, it felt like a punch to the chest. It wasn't just a sale. It was erasure. A final step in pretending we had never been part of that home at all. But as painful as it was, something inside me hardened into resolve. If Amanda thought she could use the market to outrun the truth, she underestimated me. Howard rested his hand over mine. "What now?" I straightened my back, opening my folder. "Now," I said, "we stop her." I knew I couldn't rely on documents alone. Not with Amanda twisting every story before it even reached people's ears. Monica had been clear, we needed Brian's own words. Not a text message easily dismissed, not a memory muddled by stress. We needed something solid. Something real. So I called him. "Brian, can you meet me at the park near the old library? Just you. Please." There was a long pause on the phone. Then a quiet, "Okay." When I arrived, he was already there, sitting on a bench beneath the oak tree where he used to climb as a boy. For a moment, I saw that child again, the one who scraped his knees and ran to me crying. But the man sitting there now looked older, worn down, guilt pressing on his shoulders like a weight he didn't know how to carry. He stood when I approached. "Mom, I don't want to fight." "Neither do I said softly. "I just want the truth." We sat. Silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. I tucked my phone into my coat pocket, the recorder already running. Brian, I said, did we pay the down payment on that house? His jaw tensed. Yes. Did you and Amanda agree we'd live there, permanently? That we'd never pay rent? He swallowed hard. Yes, Mom. We said that. We all agreed. I nodded, my chest tight. Then why all of this? His eyes glossed over. Amanda said it was better this way. She said you two were taking over. She said, Mom, I didn't know she'd go this far. A single tear slipped down his cheek. But guilt doesn't erase truth. Brian, I whispered, your silence helped her. He bowed his head. And in that moment, I knew the recording captured something stronger than evidence. It captured the fracture between a mother and her son. A fracture we might never fully repair. The next morning, Howard and I sat across from Monica at her office table, a sturdy wooden desk that now looked more like a command center. Sunlight streamed in through half-closed blinds, casting thin stripes across the mountain of documents we had assembled. My leather folder was open, pages neatly arranged, screenshots printed, recordings transcribed. And now, finally, Brian's admission sat at the top of the stack like the missing puzzle piece. Monica adjusted her glasses and began sorting everything into sections. This, she said, tapping the first pile, is evidence of financial contribution. This section is misrepresentation and deceptive documents. This is your timeline of events. And this, she tapped the recording of Brian, is intent. This proves the agreement existed. Her confidence steadied me. It felt like someone had finally switched on a light in a dark room. We're filing for an emergency injunction today, she continued. Illegal eviction. Fraud by concealment. Financial interest claim. And damages for emotional distress and displacement. Howard raised an eyebrow. All that at once? Monica nodded. She escalated. Now we escalate properly. Just then, her paralegal stepped in with a fresh envelope, Amanda's response. Monica skimmed it quickly, her jaw tightening. She's filed a counterclaim, Monica said slowly. Alleging you two were abusive, disruptive, and refused to leave voluntarily. My stomach twisted. Howard shook his head, disbelief turning into quiet anger. We never raised our voices. We never threatened anyone. I know, Monica said. And soon, the court will know too. She slid a stack of papers toward us. Your hearing is set. Sooner than expected. The room fell silent. This wasn't fear anymore. This was the moment before a storm breaks, the kind where you choose whether to run or stand your ground. The night before the hearing, Howard and I sat together in the small rented room we'd found. It wasn't much, just a bed, a dresser, and a small lamp that flickered whenever the heater kicked in, but after weeks of uncertainty and motel nights, it felt like a safe corner carved out of chaos. The kind of place where you could breathe without tiptoeing. I spread my leather folder across the blanket, sorting through its contents for what felt like the 100th time. Every page was familiar now. Every receipt. Every screenshot. Every signature. Evidence of the life we built and the promises that were broken. Howard watched me quietly from the bed. His hands rested on his knees, fingers interlaced. I could see the exhaustion in his face as physical, emotional, but there was something else too. Steadiness. A quiet kind of strength. You don't have to keep looking through that, he said gently. We're ready. I shook my head. I know. I need to see it. To remind myself we're not crazy. We didn't imagine any of this. He nodded. After a moment, he reached over and took my hand. Lorraine, he whispered, we may lose Brian over this. We might already have. His words landed softly but heavily. I had been avoiding that truth, tucking it into the edges of my mind. Losing a home was one thing. Losing a child, even an adult child, was another kind of grief. I know, I said quietly. But we can't keep being erased. Not by her. Not by the story she tells. Not by silence. We sat there for a long moment, just holding hands, listening to the hum of the heater. Then I closed the folder gently and said the words I'd been building toward for months. Tomorrow, we stop being the freeloaders in her story. Tomorrow, the truth walks into that courtroom. Outside, the world was silent. Inside, I felt something shift. Fear didn't leave, but dignity finally returned. The courthouse hallway felt colder than outside, as if the air itself carried judgment. Howard walked beside me slowly, his hand looped through my arm for balance, his breath steady but shallow. I held my leather folder tight against my chest, every document inside felt like a heartbeat, like proof that our lives hadn't been a fevered dream shaped by Amanda's cruelty. When we stepped into the courtroom, the hum of whispered conversations washed over us. People filled the benches, curious relatives, neighbors who'd quietly chosen sides, and a few strangers waiting for their own hearings. The room smelled faintly of paper and old wood. My eyes found them immediately. Amanda sat at the petitioner's table, pristine in a tailored blouse, posture perfect, hair smoothed back with the precision of someone staging a performance. Her lawyer leaned toward her, murmuring something that made her nod with practiced calm. She looked composed. Confident. Like someone who expected to win. Brian sat beside her, but he didn't look at ease. His shoulders were rounded, his hands clasped tight, his foot tapping the floor in a restless rhythm. When he saw us across the aisle, he looked away quickly. Shame has a way of bending the spine. Near the back row, I spotted Mr. Derek Allen, hat in his hands, eyes steady and warm. He nodded once, just enough to remind me we weren't walking into this alone. The bailiff called for order, his voice echoing off the high walls. Everyone shuffled into stillness. Then the judge entered, stern face, measured steps, eyes sharp enough to read the room in a single sweep. As she settled into her seat, my pulse thudded. This was it. Months of manipulation, lies, fear, humiliation, all leading to this room, this moment, this reckoning. I exhaled slowly. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally in a place where it couldn't be silenced. Amanda's lawyer stood first, smoothing the front of his suit before stepping forward with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed every line. His voice was steady, carefully modulated, professional sympathy layered over firm accusation. Your Honor, he began, my clients, Brian Fisher and Amanda Bowen, have endured months of escalating disruption from Mr. and Mrs. Fisher. He gestured toward us politely, as if he were acknowledging a distant inconvenience. Despite offering temporary housing out of kindness, they have faced hostility, refusal to leave, and emotional strain that has affected their young children. Amanda nodded at each word, even adding the occasional soft sniffle. She kept a tissue in her hand, dabbing her eyes at perfectly timed moments. If I hadn't lived in that house, if I hadn't heard her real voice behind closed doors, I might have believed her too. Her lawyer continued, the Fishers were never granted ownership. They were never tenants. They agreed to stay temporarily. When asked to leave for the well-being of the household, they became confrontational. He paused. My clients were forced to call the authorities for everyone's safety. Safety. The room seemed to shrink around me. The judge listened quietly, expression unreadable, fingers steepled. When the lawyer finished, she turned to Amanda. Ms. Bowen, did you ever put any agreement in writing regarding shared ownership or permanent residence? Amanda sat up straighter, voice soft but firm. No, Your Honor. Nothing like that. We were just trying to help them temporarily. A few relatives behind her nodded along, whispering. For a moment, the weight of her false story pressed against my chest. She spoke as if truth were clay, something she could shape however she pleased. But I kept my eyes on the judge. Because lies might make the first impression. But evidence makes the last. When it was Monica's turn to speak, she rose with a calm steadiness that immediately changed the air in the room. She wasn't theatrical. She didn't raise her voice. She simply laid out the truth the way a surgeon reveals the source of an illness, precise, measured, undeniable. Your Honor, she began, my clients contributed the down payment that made this home possible. Not as a gift. Not as charity. but as part of a clear family agreement. She lifted the first stack of documents. Here are the bank statements showing the transfers, large, direct, purposeful. Dated days before the house was purchased. She handed them to the bailiff. Papers were passed to the judge. A few people in the gallery leaned forward. A flat screen mounted near the judge's bench flickered on, the kind they use for evidence. Monica continued, "Here are text messages from Ms. Bowen herself." She clicked a button, and the courtroom screen lit up with Amanda's own words, "This will be your home too. No rent ever. We're a team." The room grew still. I watched Amanda's face pale, just slightly, her fingers tightening around her tissue. She didn't look at the screen. She didn't look at us. Monica then lifted our handwritten agreement, the one Brian wrote out at our kitchen table the night before closing. This document, signed by all parties, outlines the shared understanding. The Fishers provide the down payment. In return, they live in the home permanently. She paused. That is not temporary housing. That is a commitment. The judge leaned forward, studying the page. And all signatures are original? Yes, Your Honor, Monica replied. Murmurs rippled through the gallery, surprise, disbelief, recognition. A warmth rose in my chest, not triumphant, but steady. For months, Amanda had twisted our story like wet string. But these weren't emotions. They weren't impressions. They were facts. And facts don't bend. They land. Monica moved to the next folder, a thin stack of papers clipped neatly together. But the moment I saw the top page, my stomach tightened. It was the same form Amanda had slipped into the pile after Howard's health scare. The one she'd hidden behind the emergency authorizations. Your Honor, Monica said, holding it up, these are the documents the respondents were told to sign during a medical incident. They believed they were authorizing emergency contact access only. Instead, attached behind those pages was a separate, undisclosed form labeling them as tenants at will. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. Monica continued, note the timing. This document was signed immediately after Mr. Fisher's dizzy spell. When he and Mrs. Fisher were vulnerable, frightened, and focused on health, not legal agreements. She passed the pages to the bailiff. From where I sat, I could see the judge examining the signatures, the dates, the mismatched paper types, the different stapling holes that proved the pages weren't originally attached. Monica added, Ms. Bowen did not disclose, verbally or in writing, that she had added a tenancy document. Yet she later used this form to justify eviction, claiming they were temporary occupants who had overstayed. The judge looked up sharply. Ms. Bowen, did you explain this second document to the Fishers? Amanda shifted, her lips tightening. They signed everything willingly, she said, her voice thin. They knew. Monica stepped in gently. If so, Your Honor, why was the page labeled tenant status placed behind a medical consent form? Why was it never mentioned in text messages, emails, or any correspondence? A hush fell over the courtroom. Amanda's composure cracked just slightly, the twitch of her jaw, the narrowing of her eyes, the way she clutched her tissue like it was the only thing tethering her to the room. The judge tapped the paper with her pen. This is concerning. And for the first time since the door was locked on us, I felt the scales begin to shift, not toward vengeance, but toward truth. Monica lifted the small USB drive I had given her weeks earlier. It looked insignificant, just a piece of plastic and metal, but I knew what lived inside it. My hands tightened in my lap as she approached the evidence screen. Your Honor, she said calmly, I would now like to present audio recordings taken inside the home. Amanda's lawyer immediately rose. Objection, lack of consent. Monica didn't even flinch. Your Honor, we can address the court's standards for evidence. But at minimum, these recordings corroborate the threats, the timeline, and intent, alongside documents and witness testimony. The judge nodded. Proceed. Monica pressed a button. Amanda's voice filled the courtroom. Cold. Sharp. Unfiltered. You two are freeloaders. I'm done pretending. Legally, this is my house, and I can put you out anytime I like. A ripple moved through the gallery, soft gasps, shifting bodies. Even the judge's pen paused mid-air. Monica clicked again. You think keeping old receipts gives you power? It doesn't. You don't have any rights here. I watched Amanda freeze, her jaw tightening, her face draining of color. She looked like someone hearing her own reflection shatter in a room full of witnesses. Then Monica played the last piece, Brian's voice from our park conversation. Yes, Mom, you paid the down payment. We agreed they'd live with us permanently. Amanda said it was better this way. I didn't know she'd go this far. Brian closed his eyes. His shoulders slumped. He looked small, like the truth was finally too heavy to hide behind. Monica stepped back. Your Honor, this is not the voice of a temporary arrangement gone wrong. This is coercion, misrepresentation, and deliberate removal. Then she called the witness. Mr. Derek Allen walked to the stand with slow, steady steps. He took the oath, sat down, and looked straight at the judge. I saw it, he said simply. All of it. She locked them out on purpose. Their bags were on the porch. They weren't trespassing, they were being thrown out. The courtroom fell silent. Amanda's image, polished, curated, rehearsed, finally began to crack wide open. And for the first time, the truth didn't whisper. It echoed. When Derek stepped down from the witness stand, the room settled into a tense, waiting stillness, like everyone sensed the next moment would tilt the entire story. Monica returned to her seat, calm and composed, while Amanda stared straight ahead, her jaw tight, fingers twisting what was left of her tissue. Brian sat slumped, as if gravity had finally caught him. The judge took several moments to review her notes. The only sound was the soft turning of pages and the faint hum of the courtroom lights. My heart beat against my ribs, slow, heavy, bracing itself. Finally, the judge looked up. Having reviewed the evidence, she began, her voice firm but even, this court finds that Mr. and Mrs. Fisher were subjected to an unlawful eviction. A quiet gasp rippled through the room. I felt Howard tighten his grip on my hand. The judge continued, eyes sweeping toward Amanda. Furthermore, the use of deceptive documents, particularly the tenancy form hidden within medical authorization paperwork, constitutes misrepresentation. This is a serious breach of trust. Amanda's composure cracked, her lips parted, her face flushing with anger and disbelief. Regarding the home, the judge said, turning her gaze toward us, the financial contributions made by Mr. and Mrs. Fisher were significant and clearly tied to a mutual living arrangement. Therefore, the court recognizes their equitable interest in the property. My breath caught. I felt tears gathering, relief, grief, vindication all mixing together. The judge's final words fell like a gavel themselves. Ms. Bowen must either buy out the Fishers at a court-determined amount or proceed with a supervised sale in which their share is protected. Damages for wrongful eviction are hereby awarded. Silence filled the courtroom. Heavy. Final. I looked toward Brian. He was crying, quietly, helplessly, but I didn't move toward him. Some distances can't be crossed in a single moment. But justice had finally spoken. And this time, no one could lock it out. When the judge's final words echoed through the courtroom, it felt like the air shifted, slowly at first, then all at once. People began to rise from the benches in a wave of murmurs and exchanged looks. Some relatives who had believed Amanda's story now darted glances between us with discomfort or quiet shame. Others avoided eye contact altogether, as if my presence reminded them of how easily they had bought into her lies. Amanda stood rigid, her face a mask cracking at the edges. She gathered her purse with sharp, jerky movements, refusing to look in my direction. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she shook him off, eyes blazing with a mixture of humiliation and fury. I knew that expression. It wasn't remorse. It was the anger of someone whose performance had collapsed in public. Brian lingered behind her, not quite following, not quite staying. His eyes were red, his face pale. For a moment, he looked like a young boy again, lost, ashamed, unable to reconcile what had happened with the story he'd forced himself to believe. He stepped toward us, voice small. Mom. Dad. I'm so sorry. I looked at him, my heart aching in a way the judge's ruling couldn't heal. Brian, I said quietly, we'll talk. But not today. His breath hitched, but he nodded. There was no anger in my voice, no cruelty. Just a boundary. One I should have drawn long before our keys stopped working. As Howard and I walked out of the courtroom, the sunlight hit us through the glass doors, warm, steady, real. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. Not completely. Not magically. But enough. Justice had spoken. The truth had stood. And the story Amanda built had fallen apart. After the ruling, everything moved fast, papers signed, timelines arranged, funds transferred. It was surreal watching months of fear and uncertainty finally being processed into something solid, something we could hold in our hands. When the money reached our account, Monica hugged me gently and said, "You've taken back your story." I didn't cry then. I waited until the door closed behind us. With the settlement secured, Howard and I found a small apartment on the quieter side of town. Nothing grand. Nothing fancy. But it was ours. Ours in a way that house had never been, despite how much of ourselves we poured into it. The landlord handed us the keys, heavy brass ones that clinked together with a pleasant weight. I held them for a moment, feeling the cool metal warm against my palm. We moved in slowly, savoring every step. The walls were bare at first, echoing softly when we spoke. But soon, they filled with small touches, our worn quilt, the ceramic lamp Howard fixed years ago, the framed picture from our wedding day. I placed it on the dresser without asking permission. Without worrying about aesthetics or consistency. On the balcony, we arranged a few potted plants, basil, rosemary, a small rosebush that had stubborn roots and refused to die no matter how many times it was trimmed back. It felt like a symbol of us, trimmed by life, but still blooming. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Howard sat beside me in our new little garden and murmured, "Feels good to breathe again." He was right. It did. This space, quiet, humble, honest, held no secrets, no shifting rules, no doors that could be locked against us. For the first time in a long time, I felt home. It was about 3 months after we settled into our new apartment when Brian reached out. His message was short, almost hesitant. Can I bring the kids to visit?" Just the 3 of us. I stared at the screen for a long moment before showing it to Howard. He nodded gently. We both missed the children, even though neither of us could say it without our voices shaking. When they arrived the following Saturday, Chloe came in first, her eyes wide as she looked around our small living room. Adam followed close behind, holding a homemade card with scribbles and stickers. Brian stood in the doorway, nervous, uncertain, almost as if he didn't know whether he was welcome. I crouched down to hug the children. Chloe wrapped her arms around my neck tighter than I expected, whispering, "I'm glad you're safe." Adam clung to my waist, pressing his cheek against me like he had been waiting months for that moment. We spent the afternoon playing board games and sharing snacks. The kids laughed freely, no tension, no whispered arguments behind closed doors. Just joy. At one point, Adam wandered into the kitchen and said, "Grandma, your new house is cozy. I like it here." Chloe, older and more aware, asked quietly, "Why don't you live with us anymore?" I sat beside her and stroked her hair. "Sometimes," I said softly, "grown-ups break promises. And when that happens, we protect our hearts. But we still love you very, very much." Brian overheard. He looked down, guilt carving lines into his face. He didn't interrupt. Not this time. When they left, Adam hugged me 3 times. Chloe squeezed my hand. Brian whispered, "Thank you for letting them come." I nodded, but inside, I held fast to my boundaries. Because love can continue, even when trust cannot. Some evenings, when the apartment is quiet and the glow from our balcony light spills gently across the floor, I sit with a cup of tea and let myself remember everything the past year carried. Not to reopen wounds, those have healed into scars, but to understand who I became through all of it. Justice came. Not perfectly, not without loss, but it came. The court recognized our place in that home, even when the people inside it tried to erase us. Amanda faced consequences she never expected, consequences built not from anger, but from truth laid bare in a room where lies couldn't breathe. But justice isn't the same as healing. Healing, that takes its own slow shape. Some days, I still feel the sting of betrayal, quiet but steady, like a bruise you discover long after the impact. Losing trust in your own child is a kind of grief I don't have a name for. I don't know if the distance between Brian and me will ever fully close. Maybe it shouldn't, not yet. Boundaries exist for a reason, and mine were earned through fire. But I've learned something important. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reopening the door. Sometimes it simply means putting the anger down so it doesn't follow you into every tomorrow. And slowly, gently, I've done that. I've forgiven enough to breathe. Enough to sleep without replaying every moment. Enough to look at my granddaughter's smile without feeling my heart twist. But forgiveness didn't change the ending. Amanda remains outside the circle of my life. Some roads do not lead back. What matters is this: I reclaimed my dignity. I regained my home, even if it's a different one. And I learned that truth, once spoken, can set you free, even if it takes time. I close my eyes, breathe in the quiet, and let peace settle in my chest. Not the peace someone gives you, but the peace you earn by standing up, step by trembling step, and refusing to disappear from your own story. If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it. If you have a unique story of your own, share it in the comments below. Thank you for listening.